Okay, so what is next? Woohoo! We finished this one. What is next in store for us? Introduction, making a website responsive. Alright, we are on to the next unit. Here, where is it? Making a website responsive. Making a website responsive. What is the goal of the unit? To utilize responsive web design practices. You will learn how to create websites that can be viewed on a variety of devices and use different layouts and positioning. After this unit, you will be able to understand responsive web design, use media queries, use CSS Grid and Flexbox for layout, positioning, and responsiveness. What was that? You will put, so this is the more updated version that people are using these days. So this is going to be important. Put all of this knowledge into practice with an upcoming portfolio project. You can complete the project portfolio either in parallel with or after taking a prerequisite content. It's up to you. Didn't I go through that already? All right. This is helpful if you'd like to understand how to create websites that respond to users' screen size, platform, and orientation. After you finish reading this article, return to this page and complete the following assessment. We have to read this article? Sure. So the guidelines for responsive web design on Smashing Magazines. Almost every new client these days wants a mobile version of their website. Almost every new client these days wants a mobile version of their website. It's practically essential. After all, one designed for the BlackBerry, another for the iPhone, the iPad network, Kindle, and all screen resolution must be compatible too. In the next 5 years, we will likely need to design for a number of additional inventions. When will the madness stop? It won't, of course. In the field of web design and development, we're quickly getting to the point of being unable to keep up with the endless new resolutions and devices. For many websites, creating website versions for each resolution and new device will be impossible or at least impractical. Should we just suffer the consequences of losing visitors from one device for the benefit of gaining visitors from another, or is there another option? What is the responsive web design? Responsive web design is the approach that suggests that design and development should respond to the user's behavior and environment based on screen size, platform, and orientation. The practice consists of a mix of flexible grids and layouts, images, and an intelligent use of CSS media queries. As the users switches from their laptop to iPad, the website should automatically switch to accommodate for resolution, image size, and scripting abilities. One may also have to consider the settings on their devices. If they have a VPN for iOS on their iPad, for example, the website should not block the user's access to the page. In other words, the website should have the technology to automatically respond to the user's preferences. This would eliminate the need for a different design and development phase for each new gadget on the market. For each new gadget on the market. And this one is interesting. Motion sensors can be paired with climate control systems to adjust a room's temperature and ambient lighting as it fills with people. Oh. Alright, I didn't get to share the link that I'm going through. Let me paste that into the comments chat section. And then, okay. This is a lot to read. Let's just take this assessment quickly. What are some things a front-end developer should account for when designing a website to be responsive? Well, this is about making it responsive, so automatically resizable images, adjustable screen resolutions, and automatically resizable images. Yes, the website must be able to render its contents regardless of screen size and dimensions. What's the purpose of CSS Media Query? Well, it has to do something with the adjustable sizes, how to display an asset based on the size and orientation of the user screen. Correct! This is a powerful tool to utilize when learning responsive web design. How to display an asset based on the size and orientation of the user's screen. Alright, let's start the next lesson. Sizing the elements. Relative measurements. Modern technology allows users to browse the internet via multiple devices, such as desktop monitors, mobile phones, tablets, and more. Devices of different screen sizes, however, pose a problem for web developers. How can we ensure that a website is readable and visually appealing across all devices, regardless of screen size? This is a nice website. The answer is responsive design. Responsive design refers to the ability of a website to resize and reorganize its contents based on 1. The size of the other content on the website, 2. The size of the screen the website is being viewed on. The size of the other content on the website, the size of the screen the website is being viewed on. In this lesson, we'll size HTML content relative to other content on the website. In this lesson, we'll size HTML content relative to other content on a website. You've probably noticed the units of pixels or px used in websites. Pixels are used to size content to exact dimensions. For example, if you want a div to be exactly 500 pixels wide and 100 pixels tall, then the unit of pixels can be used. Pixels, however, are fixed, hard-coded values. When the screen size changes, like switching from landscape to portrait view on a phone, elements sized with pixels can appear too small, overflow the screen, or become completely illegible. With CSS, you can avoid hard-coded measurements and use relative measurements instead. Overflow the screen or become completely illegible. Oh, really? Okay, so with CSS, you can avoid hard-coded measurements and use relative measurements instead. Relative measurements offer an advantage over hard-coded measurements as they allow for the proportions of a website to remain intact regardless of screen size or layout. The website in the browser to the right uses many relative measurements. Resize the page by increasing and decreasing the browser's width repeatedly. What do you notice about how the content of the page responds to the changes in width? What do you notice about how the content on the page responds to the changes in width? When you're done resizing the browser component, proceed to the next exercise. Okay, so they want us to check out how this page looks when it's being resized. So for this section, they just go into the same line. Whoa, it disappeared. And then for this section, it just expands and there's a, is there a maximum width? There's no maximum width. Let's see if there's a minimum width. There's no minimum width, it disappeared. Alright, let's see the pictures. Oh, the pictures grow smaller and smaller. And it grows bigger and bigger. Alright. Well, there's a cheat sheet. What's this cheat sheet about? Okay, this is a cool cheat sheet. Usage of percentage. Oh, this is what I needed. Okay. EM, incorporating relative sizing starts by using units other than pixels. One unit of measurement you can use in CSS to create relatively sized content is the EM, written as EM in CSS. Incorporating relative sizing starts by using units other than pixels. One unit of measurement you can use is in CSS to create relatively sized content is the EM, written as EM in CSS. Historically, the EM represented the width of a capital letter M and the typeface and size being used. That is no longer the case. Today, the EM represents the font size of the current element or the default base font size set by the browser if none is given. For example, if the base font of a browser is 16 pixels, which is normally the default size of text in the browser, then 1 EM is equal to 16 pixels. 2 EMs would equal 32 pixels, and so on. Let's take a look at 2 examples that show how EM can be used in CSS. Let me read this again. Today, the EM represents the font size of the current element or the default base font size set by the browser if none is given. For example, if the base font of a browser is 16 pixels, which is normally the default size of text in a browser, then 1 EM is set to 16 pixels, 2 EMs would equal 32 pixels, and so on. Okay, so the heading is going to be, the font size would be set to EM. In the example above, so it's just another measure of units. In the example of the above, no base font has been specified. Therefore, the font size of the heading element will be set relative to the default font size of the browser. Assuming the default font size is 16 pixels, then the font size of the heading elements will be 32 pixels. The example above shows how to use EMs without relying on the default font size of the browser. without relying on the default font size. Instead, the space font size 18 pixels is defined for all text within the splash section element. The second CSS rule will set the font size of all H1 elements inside of the splash section. Relative to the base font of splash section 18 pixels. The H1 elements will be 27 pixels. Okay, so here, for step 1, we go to the banner section and set H1 to 1.5 EM. Is that right? Why does it not look right? Oh, right. Right. H1, oh, this is where you want to do it. You want to set the font size in banner. .5 EM. And then the same thing for H2. We want to set that to 1.75. And then the one in H3, we want to set that to 0.25. And then the one in footer, whoa, it's changing. Everything changed. The footer, we want it, so they want us to place it after font family, to 0.75 EM. The second relative unit of measurement in CSS is the REM, coded as REM. The second relative unit of measurement in CSS is the REM, coded as REM. The second relative unit of measurement in CSS is the REM, coded as REM. So there's M and then there's REM. And REM stands for root M. What did the EM stand for before? Incorporating. It represents the width of the capital letter M and the typeface and size being used. Oh wait, no, that is no longer the case. Now it represents the font size of the current element. I don't know what it stands for, but it just represents the font size of the current element. And so RAM is root M. It's similar to M, but instead of checking parent elements to size font, it checks the root element. The root element is the HTML tag. Most browsers set the font size of HTML to 16 pixels. So by default, RAM measurements will be compared to that value. To set a different font size for the root element, you can add a CSS value. You can add a CSS rule. To set a different font size for the root element, you can add a CSS rule. You can add CSS rule. In the example above, the font size of the root element HTML is set to 20 pixels. All subsequent REM measurements will now be compared to that value, and the size of H1 elements in the example will be 40 pixels. Okay, so the root element is 20 pixels, and then everything H1 will be times 2, 40 pixels. One advantage of using REMs is that all elements are compared to the same font size value, making it easy to predict how large or small font will appear. If you are interested in sizing elements consistently across an entire website, the REM measurement is the best unit for the job. I see why REM is being used. If you're interested in sizing elements in the comparison to other elements nearby, then the M unit will be better suited for the job. I see. So we want to add something on line 3 to set the font size of the root element to 16 pixels. Like that. Let's update the font size you set in the previous exercise to REM instead of M. So in banner H1, we're setting that to be what? 3.75 REM? I guess. So let's look at the banner's header. Does that change? It makes it much bigger. Set the font size of the dot post H2 to be 1.0. It's using REM already. And then the font size for header 3, where's that? I'm guessing it's that one. To be 1.25 REM. And now finally for the font size. Okay. Great. Percentages, height and width. To size non-text HTML element relative to their parent element on the page, you can use percentages. Percentages are often used to size box model values like width and height, padding, border, and margins. They can also be used to set positioning properties, top, bottom, left, right. To start, let's size the height and width of an element using percentages. In the example above, .main and .subsection each represent divs. The subsection div is nested within the .main div. Note that the dimensions of the parent div .main have been set to a height of 300 pixels and a width. When percentages are used, elements are sized relative to the dimension of their parent element, also known as container. Therefore, the dimensions of the subsection div will be 150 pixels tall and 250 pixels wide. Half of half. Yup, be careful. A child element's dimension may be set erroneously if the dimension of its parent elements aren't set first. Because the box model includes padding, borders, and margins, setting an element's width to 100% may cause content to overflow its parent container. While tempting, 100% should only be used when content will not have padding, border, or margin. Currently, the blog takes up the full width of the body. Let's modify this so that it doesn't extend to fill the full width. In style.css, set the width in #blog to 86%. This will responsively set the entire blog's container to 86% of the full width of the body. This will responsively set the entire blog's container to 86% of the full width of the body. Currently, the blog takes up the full width of the body. Let's modify this so that it doesn't extend to fill the full width. Currently, it takes up the full width. It wasn't like that before. Let's modify this so that it doesn't extend to fill the full width. Set the #blog to have a width of just 80%, 86%. This will responsively set the entire blog container to 86% of the full width. No, it doesn't. Why? Not when it's smaller than a certain size. Great, resize the browser width again. Notice that the blog text becomes illegible at smaller width. Does it? I see it just fine. Do they mean that it's not showing up and it's overflowing? To fix this, set the width in the .blog hash the #blog.post to 52%. So do that. This will ensure that the text fills only 52% of its container's blog. What? I guess they want it like that. So first they did what? They set the width of the blog to 86%, but the post to be, no, the text to be 52%. I don't know why they did that. Now set the width of I'll set the width in .post.image container to 100%. This will make sure the image container is always the full width of the blog post. So what does that mean? Oh, so the text is at 52%. Wait a minute. So are they talking about the pictures? Now let's see what that does. Now the image is 100%, but it's not centered. Scroll to the bottom of the web page. Notice that there are two images. We like to display these images next to each other with equal width. So set the width in the images. That image container to 50%. So just changing the width can change where it shows up. This will give each image and dot images equal width. Yes, it does. Don't worry, the images still look distorted at the moment. We will improve their appearances in later exercises. Percentages, padding and margin. Percentages can also be used to set the padding and margin of elements. Percentages can also be used to set the padding and margin of elements. When height and width are set using percentages, you learn that the dimensions of child elements are calculated based on the dimensions of the parent element. When percentages are used to set padding and margin, however, they are calculated based only on the width of the parent element. Percentages can also be used to set the padding and margin of elements. When height and width are set using percentages, you learn that the dimensions of child elements are calculated based on the dimensions of the parent element. When percentages are used to set padding and margin, however, they are calculated based only on the width of the parent element. They are calculated based only on the width of the only on the width. For example, when a property like margin left is set using a percentage, say 50%, the element will be moved halfway to the right in the parent container as opposed to the child element receiving a margin half of its parent's margin. Okay, so it depends on not on the parent's margin, but on the parent's width. Consider the following scenario. A container div is defined, but its height is not set, meaning it's flat. Why? Consider the following scenario. A container div is defined, but its height is not set, meaning it's flat. The container then has a child element added within. The child element does have a set height. This causes the height of its parent container to stretch to that height. This causes the height of its parent container to stretch to that height. The container then has a child element added within. The child element does have a set height. This causes the height of its parent container to stretch to that height. height is not set, it's flat. The container then has a child element added within. The child element does not have a set height. Does have a set height. This causes the height of its parent container to stretch to that height. The child element requires a change and its height is modified. This causes the parent container's height to also stretch to the new height. This cycle occurs endlessly whenever the child element's height is changed. This cycle occurs endlessly whenever the child element's height is changed. This cycle occurs endlessly whenever the child element's height is changed. To also stretch to the new height. In the scenario above, an unset height, the parent results in constantly changing height due to changes to the child element. This is why vertical padding and margin are based on the width of the parent and not the height. Well, what does that do? Note when using relative sizing, M's and R's should be used to size text and dimensions on the page related to text size. Padding, i.e. padding around text. This creates a consistent layout based on text size. Otherwise, percentages should be used. Okay, so let's just follow the instructions. Let's size the height of the banner relative to the root's element's font size. Let's size the height of the banner relative to the root element's font size. In style.css banner rule set, add a height property and assign it to 46 rem. Size the height of the banner relative to the root element font size. Let's size the height of the banner relative to the root element's font size. Let's size the height of the banner relative to the root element's font size. The root element's font size in style.css for the banner rule set, add the height property and assign it to 46 rem. Okay, so in the banner here we set the height to be 46 rem. So right now that's the banner, and when we save that, it's going to be big again. Meaning that 46 rem will result in a height of 736 pixels. Okay. Set the top margin in blog post to margin top to be 12.5%. Which one is a blog post? Okay, now I save that. I think it gave us some space over there. And the bottom margin should give us some space. Over there. And if we use percentages, it depends on the width of the parent. So let's see what happens. It grows as we expand the page. Okay. Okay. Now the bottom margin. What's the bottom margin in the images? Where's the images? Images. Here it is. And let's see. That gives us some space. Alright, the width, minimum and maximum. Although relative measurements provide consistent layouts across devices of different screen sizes, elements on a website can lose their integrity when they become too small or large. You can limit how wide an element becomes with the following properties. You can limit how wide an element becomes with the following properties. Min width ensures a minimum width for an element. Max width ensures a maximum width for an element. ensures a minimum width for an element. Ensures a minimum width for an element. Okay. In the example above, when the browser is resized, the width of the paragraph elements will not fall below 300 pixels, nor will their width exceed 600 pixels. When a browser window is narrowed or widened, text can become either very compressed or very spread out, making it difficult to read. These two properties ensure that content is legible by limiting the minimum and maximum width. The unit of pixels is used to ensure hard limits on the dimension of the elements. So does that mean every time we use min width and max width, we have to set it in terms of pixels? Resize the browser to the right. Notice how the text on the web page can become difficult to read. Let's limit the text width to keep it legible. Are they talking about that, or like it disappears completely? Okay, so they're telling us to add a 200 minimum width. Where do we do that? "200 pixels and run your code." Where do we do that? In the body? Let's put that in the banner. Oh great, it's wrong. I don't know where to put it. Alright, so we're supposed to just put it into the paragraph. So instead of inside the banner, we put it directly as they did it in there. Wait, not here. Outside. Okay, so now let's see the results. It's still being compressed the way it did before. Or are they oh, they're talking about the paragraphs. Oh, they were talking about the paragraphs. Oh my god. Yeah, so it stops minimizing for the smaller ones. Height is minimum and maximum. In the example above, the height of all paragraphs will not shrink below 150 pixels, and the height will not exceed 300 pixels. So it's possible that the content will overflow outside of the element, resulting in content that is not legible. Resize your browser, stretch it out. How do we do that? We cannot do that. Let me see. Can we do that? I mean, like, what is this supposed to show if we resize it? I don't know what it's supposed to show. Anyways, notice that the paragraph text can become overly spread out. Let's limit the height to keep the text legible. Same thing as last time, but we just want to put a min height to 200 pixels. I don't know the difference. Nothing really changes. Nothing really changes. Alright, let's continue. Scaling images and videos. Many websites contain a variety of different media, like images and videos. When a website contains such media, it's important to make sure that it's scaled proportionally so that users can correctly view it. In the example above, the dot container represents a container div. It is set to a width of 50%, half of the browser's width. In this example, and a height of 200 pixels. Setting overflow to hidden ensures that any content with dimensions larger than the container will be hidden from a view. And in the second CSS rule, it ensures that the image scales with the width of the container. The height property is set to auto, meaning an image's height will automatically scale proportionally with the width. Finally, the last line will display images as block level elements rather than inline block in their default state. Finally, the last line will display images as block level elements rather than inline block in their default state. This will prevent images from attempting to align with other content on the page like text. This will prevent images from attempting to align with other content on the page like text, which can add unintended margin to the images. Oh, so inline block is a default state. I'm going to put that into the chat. Inline block is default state. And that will prevent images from attempting to align with other content on the page, like text, which can add unintended margin to the images. This will prevent images from attempting to align with other content on the page, like text, which can add unintended margin to the images. It's worth memorizing the entire example above. It represents a very common design pattern used to scale images and videos proportionally. The example above scales the width of an image or video to the width of a container. If the image is larger than the container, the vertical portion of the image will overflow and will not display. To swap this behavior, you can set max height to 100% and width to auto, essentially swapping the values. This will scale the height of the image with the height of the container instead. If the image is larger than the container, the horizontal portion of the image will overflow and not display. The horizontal portion of the image will overflow and not display. So this example will scale the width of the image to the width of a container. The width of an image or video to the width of a container. The width is 50%. Why is the width 50%? You can set max height to 100% and width to auto, essentially swapping the values. To swap this behavior, you can set max height to 100%. Max height to 100% and width to auto. Okay, so they're doing the opposite of this so that this could scale the height of the image with the height of the container instead. And whatever overflows will not display. So that is a very common design pattern to use to scale images, videos proportionally. Let me type that into the chat too. Okay, so now what do we do? Take a look at the image on the web page. Notice that they currently display incorrectly too large. Are they talking about this one? They'll set the overflow property in the image container to hidden. Alright, let's see if it is hidden. Spelled it wrong. And it gets cut off. Great. Take a look at the images once more. At this point, the image is partially displayed. In reality, what we've done is constrain them to the dimension of their container. Any part of the image that overflows out the container will be hidden from view. This will set us up to scale them proportionally. Resize the width of the browser back and forth. Notice that the image expands and contracts to show more or less of the image. Instead, let's display the full image at all times. To show more or less of the image. Okay, so to do that, we just set the width, the maximum width, to 100%. Okay, so let's, oh, wow, that's what it does. And minimize the height. So that is what happens when we add the image container to 100%. Wait a minute. It should be image dash container. Where did I put it? Image dash container image. Image dash container image. Oh yeah, we were talking about this one. Set to 100%. So that's what happens when the parent is limitless. Is that what we do? The max, set max width to 100% to ensure the full image is always displayed. Huh. I'm going to have to put that into the chat. Set width, set max width. Set max width to 100% to ensure full image. Great work. Take a look at the image on the web page. They have been greatly improved. Next, we want to make sure the image automatically remains in proportion when the browser is resized. So in here, we set the height to auto. Now let's see what that does. Was there any difference? It doesn't look like there was a difference to me. But anyways, within the same CSS rule, set the display to block. This will instruct. Why does it look like that? So there shouldn't be no space after the property name. Okay, so this will instruct the images to behave as block level elements and facilitate scaling as opposed to their default inline behavior. As opposed to their default inline behavior. How is there an inline behavior? I didn't see any difference. This is a good discussion that I will have to share the link with. Alright. As a matter of fact, let's look through it now. So I think it really depends on whether the image is more of a horizontally wide or vertically wide. Okay, so scaling the background image. background image of HTML elements can also be scaled responsively using CSS properties. Can also be scaled responsively using CSS properties. In the example above, the first CSS declaration says the background image is a placeholder. That pound symbol is a placeholder for image URL in this example. The second declaration instructs the CSS compiler to not repeat that image by default. Images will repeat. The third declaration centers the image within the element. The final declaration, however, is the focus of the example above. It's what scales to the background image. The image will cover the entire background of the element, all while keeping the image in proportion. If the dimension of the image exceed the dimensions of the container, then only a portion of the image will display. The image will cover the entire background of the element, all keeping the image in proportion. In style.css, set the background size property in banner to cover. Background size property in banner. Background size property. The background size to cover. What will that do? It will cover the entire background of the element. It's already doing that though. Well, let's run it and see. Anyways, so let's review everything in this lesson. Great work, you learned how to size elements on a website relative to other elements on the page. Let's review what you learned. Content on a website can be sized relative to other elements on the page using relative measurements. The unit of M sizes a font relative to the font size of a parent element. The unit of M sizes font is relative to the font sizes of a parent element. The unit of rem sizes font relative to the font size of a root element. That root element is the HTML element. When percentages are used to size width and height, child elements will be sized relative to the dimensions of their parent. Remember that parent dimensions must first be set. Percentages can be used to set padding and margin. Horizontal and vertical padding and margin are set relative to the width of a parent element. Percentages can be used to set padding and margin. Horizontal and vertical padding and margin are set relative to the width of a parent element. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. The minimum and maximum width of elements can be set using min width and max width. the height of an image or video is set, then its width can be set to auto so that the media scales proportionally. Reversing these two properties and values will also achieve the same result. A background image of an HTML element will scale proportionally when its background size property is set to cover. A background image of an HTML element will scale proportionally when its background size property is set to cover. The background will scale proportionally when its background size is set to cover. Yeah, I didn't know what was the difference, if that actually made a difference. Anyways, relative units of measurements are a first step towards incorporating responsive design in a website. When combined with more advanced response techniques, you can create a seamless user experience regardless of a device's screen size. When you're done, proceed to the next unit. Alright, we finished this lesson. Alright, so that will be all for this stream. I need a break and you need a break. Watch out, if you're getting a pro account, you might become a coder.